Hello, everyone, and welcome to our week 3 session of Photoshop. I am thrilled that you all are here. And I just want to say that this is a fantastic group of students. You guys have just consistently, week after week, continue to step up your game. You've done phenomenal work at following directions, and you've, done a great job of turning your assignments in on time, and also just doing really high quality, excellent assignments. So thank you for all of you having such a awesome passion for graphic design, and it's just really rewarding, and it's really inspiring to see the amazing work that you all are doing. So give yourselves a pat on the back. Week 3 is, oh great, so Nairel loved the lesson last week. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And those are skills that you guys are definitely gonna be able to use as, whether you're in school and you just wanna make a little side income doing retouching and restoration, or whether you want to get your first entry-level graphic design job as like a production assistant or assistant graphic designer, where you spend your days doing some retouching and restoration. There's a lot of career opportunities available for you guys now that you have that skill. So definitely, and also just continue to practice with it. There's a lot of really great Photoshop artists on YouTube and Pinterest that show their before and after pictures, and also show process tutorials demonstrating how to do your retouching and all those amazing tricks that you can do with adding makeup and colorizing hair and changing the lighting in a photo. So, feel free to continue to learn outside of the class, because there's only so much I can teach you in this 4-week class session. And just like playing the piano or learning any musical instrument or learning karate or something, you're not going to learn everything there is to know about Photoshop in 4 weeks. But I can certainly give you the foundations and the basics. And then in order to be a professional in this industry, you'll want to continue to work and build up your tool set and your knowledge by watching those free YouTube videos, watching Linda videos like Nairel says, going on websites like Smashing Magazine or the Design Inspiration or Pinterest, and seeing all of the different techniques that other people use. So this week we're going to be doing something really fun. We are going to be doing image compositing, which is a way of cutting out multiple pictures and then combining them together to create a new composition. So for your assignment, you're going to be taking an animal picture, a picture of a hat, a picture of a prop, and a background, and you're going to combine all of those elements together. And definitely check out some of the examples, the benchmark examples that are already in the classroom, because they're really inspiring and they give you a great idea for exactly what we're going to be doing. Something we've been talking about a lot is like the whole idea of putting all of your changes on separate layers. And so that's a big theme of this week with both your discussion and your assignment and your assessment. Making sure that you're making a product that can be edited, and you're never deleting things, you're never combining things permanently. Everything is separate. Everything can continue to be edited. And this is a really important part of working professionally, because if an editor or a client comes to you and says, you know what, I want this part of the design changed, you want to be able to go, oh, sure, I can do that, and then hand it back to that person in the next day. You don't want to have to start your project all over again just because someone wants a change made. And this thing called non-destructive editing, which is what we're going to be talking about, is all about that. It's all about how you can make sure that all your changes are on separate layers, every aspect of your project remains easily editable. So if someone wanted a change to be made, you can do that change instantaneously rather than having to start the whole project all over again. So before we begin and before I demonstrate how to do image compositing, does anyone have any questions? Any questions about last week's assignment? Was anyone stuck on anything, and do they want to show their work and get help with it? Use this next 5 minutes for me to answer any questions that you might have. Or any issues that came up last week or even in week 1. Okay, no questions from Nairel. Anyone else have any questions, need help with anything, got stuck with anything last week? All righty. Okay, cool. So a little inspiration before we begin. Beyonce is awesome, and one of the reasons why she's awesome is she's always working. She carries her laptop around with her everywhere, and this is something I want to recommend that you guys do as well. Be like Beyonce, carry your laptop with you everywhere, because you never know when you'll be waiting at the doctor's office or waiting in line at the DMV or stuck somewhere waiting for someone, and you can open up your laptop and maybe you might be all caught up on your homework, but you can at least make up a little Photoshop project while you're waiting. And if you can, maximize your time and always be working, you'll not only have more awesome stuff for your portfolio, but also you'll be, using those moments of downtime to be developing your skills. And, it's also just a great way to be efficient with your time management. Okay, so get in the habit of being like Beyonce and carry your laptop everywhere. Masking. Masking refers to the technique that we are going to be using to cut out different parts of an image and then combine them together into a new image. And there are many, many, many different tools that we can use for masking. Some of the easier ones include the marquee tools and the lasso tools. And you guys have already learned a little bit about this, right? You've also learned the quick selection tool, right? Today, we're going to learn how we can create masks using these different selection techniques, and also a clipping mask. We'll learn that as well. The color range selector and the channel pull are things that are discussed in the reading and the pre-recorded lecture, but we're not going to spend very much time on them today because you're going to have your advanced Photoshop class and your intermediate Photoshop class that goes more in depth into these more advanced tools. For the purposes of our assignment, we're going to be focusing on these. Starla just asked, do you recommend that we buy a drawing pad type of thing for our projects? Well, here's the thing. Some people love a drawing pad. Like, I personally love it. I don't use it when I'm demonstrating these classes because I know not everyone has a drawing pad, and I want to make sure that I am using the exact same tools that you guys are using in your classes. So you can, as demonstrated by the work that I do, you know, I can make perfectly fine work without a drawing pad, and then, you know, on my own time when I'm doing my own freelance projects, I have a drawing pad to do my stuff. So I would say it's not required. And also there are some students who love it, and there are some students who hate the drawing pad. And it's kind of, you know, some students are just like, they never get the hang of it. It feels really cumbersome. They end up spending a lot of money buying one, and then it just stays in their drawer and they don't actually use it. So I would say if you are thinking that a drawing pad is going to be something that you'll like, you know, go on eBay and get one for like $35 used. That's where I got my Wacom Intuos. Got it used, didn't spend a lot of money, used it for a long time. Eventually I wanted to upgrade, and so I got a really expensive Cintiq, which is like a computer monitor that you can draw on. But that's because like I use this all the time and I like it. I would hate for you guys to spend a lot of money on something that you're not going to use. So is it necessary or recommended? No. Is it like a personal preference thing? And if you're kind of suspecting that it might be something that you might like to try, then certainly get a used one and see how it goes. But it's certainly not required, and you can certainly make a lot of really fantastic projects without one. Oh, so let's go over now the different masking techniques and how to do them. So what we're going to be doing for our project this week is downloading the provided images that are in the assignment and then combining them together onto a document. Please do not use your own images. Please don't find images on the internet to use. Only use the ones that are provided in the assignment, because we want to make sure that you're using high quality images, and we also want to be able to grade you fairly. And we can ensure fair grading if everyone is using the same images. But if someone's using images that are different, I'm not going to be able to tell whether they came pre-cut out or what. So if you are then, after you do the assignment, interested in going above and beyond and finding your own images or taking your own images and combining them together for like a portfolio piece that maybe you want to do, you know, for a potential, you know, job to show employers that you know how to do some fancy stuff, feel free to do that. Feel free to email it to me. I'd be happy to provide you feedback. But for the purposes of this assignment, please only use the images that are provided in the assignment page. So you guys are going to be making a document that is 5 inches by 7 inches. So you know, go up to the top of the screen in Photoshop and click on File. And then for width, you're going to type in 7 and make sure that says inches, not pixels, because if you accidentally make your document 5 pixels by 7 pixels, it's going to be a very, very, very small document. And for our resolution, we're going to put 72. And the reason why we're making a document that is so small is because you're going to be uploading the PSD file. Unlike your previous assignments where we asked you to upload a JPEG, you are going to be uploading a PSD file for this assignment, so that we can see all of your layers and ensure that you've been doing your masking correctly. So now I'm going to click OK. And if you accidentally turn in a JPEG for this week's assignment, you're going to lose out on, so I'll have to look at the rubric, but you're going to lose out on like 50 points because I need to be able to see the different layers in your project. And you know, if I can't see those layers, you're going to lose those points. So masking works by the first step is bringing a photo into the document. So we're going to go up to File, up at the top of the screen, and we're going to go to Place Embedded, Place Embedded. And I'm just going to start with a very, very simple photo element that's really easy to cut out, and that is just a simple flower. There we go. And now I'm going to hit enter or return to place it into the document. So to bring a photo element into your document, you go File, Place Embedded, and then once it's in there, you hit enter or return. So if I were writing notes right now, which I recommend you guys all do, if you don't have a piece of paper, you're definitely going to want to have one by your computer. And you're also definitely going to want to have a pen or a pencil ready to write this down. And I would write down step 1, File, Place Embedded. Step 2, hit enter. Now we're going to use the easiest masking tool there is, and that is the marquee tools. That's at the top of our list of the different masking techniques. So you either have the rectangle marquee tool or the ellipse tool. Notice these are different than the shape tools because the shape tools create shapes. The marquee tools are creating selections. Okay, so I'm going to click on the elliptical marquee tool. And now I'm going to hold down the shift button and click and drag at a diagonal angle. And now you can see I have this dotted circular line around the flower, okay? So let me do that again. To make a selection, we're gonna first click on the marquee tools. We have either the rectangle marquee tool or the elliptical marquee tool. And then I'm gonna hold down the shift button and then click and drag using my trackpad at a diagonal angle. Let go of my trackpad, let go of my shift button, and now I have a circular selection around this flower. Next, to turn this into a mask, we're going to go down to the bottom of the layer panel and click on the square with the circle inside of it. Click on the square with the circle inside of it. And ta-da! That's how it works. We've simply kind of, you created this stencil around the image. So everything that is black, as you can see on the layer mask here, is cut away, is hidden, and everything that is white is still there. And that is how a mask works. So obviously, this circle marquee tool is just one of the many tools that you can use to create a mask. And it would certainly be useful, Command D, Command Z, Command D. It would be certainly useful if you want to kind of create a polka dot, artistic, graphic designy sort of thing. So let's say I were to make multiple polka dots like this, right? I could do kind of an interesting concept piece. And do like a polka dotted kind of design like this. But it's not, and it's certainly, it might be an interesting design, but for the purposes of our assignment, we want to actually cut things out so they actually look like what they're supposed to be. So in conclusion, that circular marquee tool would be great for something like a soccer ball, if you were cutting a soccer ball out, or anything that was round, the earth. So in week 4, you're going to be making a poster, and if you wanted to put the earth or the moon on your poster, you can certainly use the elliptical marquee tool to cut that object out. Now, another tool that gives you a little bit more flexibility is the lasso tool. And I'm going to go up to the top of the screen and make sure that we have a number of options available up here. We have the new selection icon, which is just the square by itself, the add to selection, and the subtract from selection. So since I'm making a new selection, I'm just going to click on the new selection icon up at the top of the screen. And now with the lasso tool, it allows you to trace your object. The problem is, this is my finger on the trackpad. And my finger on the trackpad is not very steady. Almost there. I'm also kind of running out of space. So when I tried to trace that flower, and then I go down to the square with a circle inside of it and cut it out, you can see the resulting selection I made is not very good. So I would not recommend the standard lasso tool for cutting things out unless you had like a Wacom tablet or some sort of stylus where you could actually draw on your screen. And you'd also want to make sure that you have a very steady hand. And I'm an artist, I like to draw, but the thing is, no matter how, how much I force myself to be steady, my hand is always going to shake a little bit. And so it's really hard to get that kind of precise line. So having, that's a case where having a Wacom tablet would really help you. Now, the next lasso tool that's available is the polygon lasso tool. Now, the polygon lasso tool is great for objects that have straight lines only. So not going to be very appropriate for this flower because this flower is all made out of curved lines. But the polygon lasso tool would be great if you are cutting something out and it's an object that's completely made out of straight lines. So for instance, there is a magic wand. That is one of the objects that you can use in your project this week. The polygon lasso tool would be great for cutting out that magic wand. Okay, so now I have completely enclosed this flower using the polygon lasso tool. And I'm going to go to the square with the circle inside of it at the bottom of the screen. And ta-da, there I have cut out my flower using the polygon lasso tool. But like I said, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look realistic. And the reason why it doesn't look good or realistic is because it's a curvy object that has been cut out with straight lines only. So I'm just control clicking on my layer mask now and then hitting delete layer mask to delete it. Now, another tool that you have that's in your lasso tools is the magnetic lasso tool. And I tend to encourage students to try and stay away from the magnetic lasso tool because it leaves a very jagged, pixelated edge, and sometimes it's a little bit hard to control. I'm going to command +sign to zoom in a little bit, and let's do it. So what this does is it creates a line that snaps to the edge of an object, and it's based on colored pixels. So it's kind of snapping to the pixels that seem to have the same color to them. So on the surface, this would seem like a pretty good idea. But the problem is for professional uses, it doesn't make a very nice, clean, polished look. Sometimes, you can use the settings that are available in Photoshop to alter it and refine and smooth the edge using those mask settings in the properties window. But I would personally just recommend not using this tool since there's so many other tools available that create a much nicer result. Okay, so I've completely enclosed the flower using the magnetic lasso tool. Now I'm going to go to the square with the circle inside of it and click. And you can see kind of what the problem was. The edges of the flower, instead of having nice smooth lines, are kind of jagged. And, We can see some of the outside. It just, the cutout isn't that great. Control click, delete layer mask. Now the quick selection tool is one you learned a little bit about last week and the week before last. And what it does is kind of like the magnetic lasso tool. It paints in areas of a picture with a selection, and it paints in those areas based on if they have kind of similar colors. So I'm gonna go up to the top of the screen and just click my new selection icon up here. And then I'm gonna go ahead and paint. And the result with the quick selection tool will be a little bit better, but it's still gonna have a little bit of a jagged edge, and it's gonna need some refinement. So I've painted my selection using the quick selection tool. Now I'm gonna go down to the bottom of the layer panel and click on the square that has the little circle inside of it. And that is that pixelated edge that I talked about, right? Not very good, not ideal, kind of a problem. So if, for whatever reason, you really want to use the quick selection tool and your object happens to have like a smooth edge like this flower does, you can technically use the refine mask options to smoothen out the edge. Now to access the refine mask options, you can go to the layer that you've selected, double click on the black and white layer mask that's next to that layer, and then click on the button that says Mask Edge. Now what you can do is shift the edge inward. And you can also smooth the edge and add contrast. And so now that flower is looking a lot better. There are still some green background areas still showing through, which is disappointing. Luckily, a mask by its nature is very editable. So we can fix those little green areas that are still showing through. How do we do that? Well, remember, if I go over here to the layer mask and I option click on it, the layer mask is a black and white image that looks like and resembles a stencil, where everything that is black is cut away, erased away, and everything that's white is still there. So I can use my paintbrush tool, and as long as I have my layer mask selected, and I know my layer mask is selected because there are little white brackets around the square layer mask icon. If I had the image selected, there would be little white brackets around the image. So by having the mask selected, I can now go in with black paint. So I have my paintbrush selected. I hit X to make black my foreground color. And every time I paint with black, I can erase that part of the image, okay? So I can erase those dark pixels. And then see here how I kind of cut in too far. Wouldn't it be nice if I could bring back what I cut too far on? Well, I can. By going to X on my keyboard, now I'm painting with white, and every time I paint with white, I can bring back that part of the image that I erased. Right, so every time I paint with white, I'm bringing back part of the image. Every time I paint with black, I erase. Okay, so that's the quick selection tool. I'm going to control click and delete layer mask. The next tool I want to show you is the pen tool. Let's do that. So the pen tool allows us to draw a vector path around the object that we want to select. And it's good for objects that have smooth lines and straight, smooth curves and straight lines. So things that you're either straight or curved will do great with the pen tool. The problem is the pen tool is a little bit cumbersome to get the hang of. And at times it seems counterintuitive. So like with the, with the lasso tool, if you want to make a selection, you just kind of draw and trace like that, right? Amani asked, after you crop, can you shrink the photo? Yes, using Command T. So with your lasso tool, you just trace like this, right? With your pen tool, though, you can't just click and drag and trace. The pen tool works a little bit differently. What you have to do in order to select something with the pen tool is you have to click on 2 points to make a straight line, okay? And then if you want to make a curve, you move your cursor and then you click on a point, but instead of letting go of your clicker, you drag out these handles. These are called Bezier curves. And those Bezier curves are like magnets that pull out the line. And so ideally you want to bend your Bezier curve in the direction of your flower. And see now how I'm staying inside the edge of the flower. And I'm clicking and dragging to pull these Bezier lines around and create these curves. Okay, so see there how I have completely enclosed that flower with the path. But I'm not going to click on the layer mask icon yet. I have to turn this path into a selection. So to turn this path into a selection, I'm going to go up to the top of the screen and I'm going to click the Make Selection button. And then I'm going to click OK. And now, only after I have clicked the Make Selection button, can I then go to the square with the circle inside of it at the bottom of the layer panel and click on it. Uh-oh, what happened? Well, with the pen tool, we actually selected everything except for what we outlined. So we need to invert at this point now, since we've made a mask, we need to invert our mask. So to invert your mask, this is a shortcut key that you're going to want to write down. You hit Command I to invert your mask. Okay, got it. Now, there's a game that you guys can play that's really good for teaching you how to use the pen tool, and that's called the Bezier game. So if you go to bezier.method.ac, where did you go? No, did the Bezier game move? Oh no. Let me go on Google. There it is. For some reason, it didn't pop up right away. But this is the website. I just pasted it into the chat right there. And the beginning is really great because it teaches you exactly how the Bezier curves with the pen tool work. So to make straight lines with the Bezier, with the pen tool, you just click on 2 points and you can see right there, straight lines are made. To create perfect diagonals and perfect vertical and horizontal lines, you hold down the shift button and you click, 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 and see how now all my diagonals are perfectly 45 degrees. All my verticals are perfect 90 degrees, and all my horizontals are perfect 180 degrees. So now I'm ready to make the curves. And so to make the curves, you have to click and pull out these handles first. Click and pull out these handles, and the curve goes, it points in the direction of the object. Like so. Now it will get a little bit more complicated when you want to kind of change the angle of the curve, and that's where those handles come out. So first, you have to click and drag to pull out these handles. And then if you want to change the angle of the handles, you have to hold down the Alt or Option button. And then you have to let go of your clicker, let go of your Alt or Option button. We're going to do the same here. I'm going to click, drag with my trackpad. Now I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option button. No, I let go too soon. So click and drag. Hold down the Alt or Option button. Let go of your clicker, let go of your Alt or Option button, and then continue. Right. And so then you can play with the rest of the shapes and just get a practice tracing and outlining things with the pen tool. So the pen tool is ideal for objects that have smooth curves and straight lines. Now the cool thing is anything that can be used to make a vector path can be used to make a selection. So remember back in week 1 when we learned all about the custom shapes in the custom shape library? You can use the custom shapes to create selections. So if you go down to the little amoeba looking shape at the bottom of your tool panel, you have all of these different tools. Let's go to the custom shape tool. And now up at the top of the screen, you have shape, path, and pixels, the 3 options available when drawing any shape. And in week 1, I taught you guys to almost always use the shape option, right? Because it makes a vector shape that can be easily resized. Well, if you're using the custom shape tool to make a selection, you're going to want to use the path option. So write that down in your notes, guys. Always use the path option if you're using the custom shape tool to make a selection. And now I'm going to select a custom shape from the custom shape library. And now I'm going to hold down the shift button and I'm going to click and drag at a diagonal angle. And see how I have now drawn this path that is this flower custom shape. I can then go up to the top of the screen where it says Make Selection, and I can click on the Make Selection button. Click OK. So now I've turned that path into a selection. This is a very, very important step prior to making the layer mask. You have to turn your path into a selection before making the layer mask. And then you can go down to the bottom of the layer panel and click on the square with a circle inside of it. Okay, and then getting back to Imani's question about then how do you shrink your object? Write this down. If you hit Command T, that brings up the transform controls, okay? You remember this? This is the bounding box that allows you to resize things. And then every time you resize, you're always gonna hold down the shift button, hold down the shift button while clicking and dragging on the corner to shrink it down, and then you can hit enter or return when you're done. So remember, always hold down the shift button when resizing something. Command Z to undo, Option Command Z to repeat undo. And now we're going to learn the final two ways to make a mask. And one way is with the Quick Mask tool. And the Quick Mask tool is a great way to simply make a selection by painting it in with the paintbrush. Different from the Quick Selection tool, but kind of the same. So what we're gonna do is hit B for brush. And you have to make sure that your foreground and background colors are pure black and white. So really important, write this down, you guys. Hit D on your keyboard. D on your keyboard resets your foreground and background colors to pure black and to pure white. And now once you have B for brush selected, and once you have your pure black on your foreground color, you are ready to start making a mask. Now, really important, I would recommend making sure that your brush hardness is all the way at 100%. I'd also recommend making your opacity and your flow 100%. And make sure your blending mode is on normal. Once you have all those settings correct and you're on the brush tool, you're gonna hit this button on your keyboard, Q. Okay, you're gonna hit Q on your keyboard just once. You're not gonna hold it down, just once. And now notice how I'm painting and nothing is happening. That's because my foreground and background colors got switched. So you need to hit X to make sure that black is your foreground color. And watch this. Now I can paint my flower. And now, of course, you're gonna wanna spend more time on it than I did. But once your selection is completely painted in, you're gonna hit X on your keyboard. Sorry, not X on your keyboard. You're gonna hit Q on your keyboard. Now notice, just like with the pen tool, everything except for the flower got selected. So if I were to make a layer mask right now, the flower would become invisible and we just see the background. So what I need to do is invert the selection. I need to invert the selection by hitting Shift Command I, Shift Command I. And now just the flower is selected. And now I can go down to the bottom of the layer panel and click on the square with the circle inside of it. And ta-da, now I have separated that flower from its background. And that is the quick mask. And just like with any selection and any mask, you can always paint back. If you've cut too much of something out, you can always paint it back by hitting X. And I'm not holding down X, I'm just hitting it once and toggling my foreground color to white. And then if you want to like erase something, you hit X again. You can see now every time I paint with black, I'm erasing like so. Okay, final masking technique is something called the clipping mask. And the clipping masks work by clipping one layer to another layer. Okay, I'm going to turn the eyeball off on the flower for a second. And then I'm going to make a new layer under the flower. It'll be a text layer. A clipping mask must work by being an actual shape of some sort. So text is a shape, so text is going to work. Use a nice, thick font. Command T to resize, holding down the Shift button, and then enter to place. Okay, so I have this text layer, and then I also have this picture layer. Now I can clip this picture inside the text by doing this. Watch. I'm going to hold down the Alt key if I'm on a PC, or the Option key if I'm on a Mac. So hold down Alt if you're on a PC and Option if you're on a Mac. Then hover your cursor over the line between the image layer and the shape layer. And you'll see your cursor will suddenly change. It will become an icon that looks like a box with a downward pointing arrow next to it. Once you see that icon become that strange shape, you're gonna continue holding down the Option button, and you're just going to click on your trackpad once on the line between the two layers. Don't click and drag because that will duplicate your layer. Just click once, and you will then clip your text or your image inside of your text or inside of your shape layer. This clipping mask is incredibly useful because if you want to use adjustment layers to change the colors of just part of an image, you can use a clipping mask to do that. So let's say I want the word flower to be purple, like a dark purple, but I don't want the rest of my document to be purple. So I decide to use the adjustment layer known as hue saturation, which you guys have all used now. And I'll click colorize, and I will darken it, and I will choose a nice purple color. Now I'm going to click X out of there. So I have this whole document is purple right now, but I just want that purple to affect the text. So to do that, I make a clipping mask by simply holding down the Option button on my keyboard Simply holding down the Option button on my keyboard, then moving my cursor to the line between hue saturation and the flower layer, and clicking once. And ta-da! Now I can change that text that says flower to whatever color I want. Just by, again, double clicking on the hue saturation icon, and then watch, I can change this to whatever color I want. Now we are finally ready to make our week 3 document using these techniques to cut images out of their background and then combine them all together. Stephanie, if I wanted to make the background purple, I would click on the background layer. See where I'm clicking on the background layer? And then I would make a new layer above the background layer. And then I would use my paint bucket tool, just like we learned in week 1. I'd change my color to purple. And then I'd click on the layer above my background. Make sense? And that is how you change the background color. Okay, so let's make a new document. I'm going to go to File, New. And then I'm going to go to 7 inches by 5 inches, resolution 72. Command +sign to zoom in. And now I'm going to bring in a selection of the images that are provided in the classroom. So let's venture over here to our week 3 assignment. And let's see, I'll choose this little guy here, animal 3. He is facing sideways. So I am going to want to make sure that whatever hat I use on this little guy is going to be a sideways facing hat. So hat 2, I think, needs to be what we use for animal 2. And then I'll use prop 2. And then a background. How about that'll be my background. Okay, now this next step of actually bringing the different photo elements into my document is really, really important. And sometimes students mess up by changing the image, by stretching it, by skewing it, and that's no good. So pay very close attention to this next part. So I'm going to go to File, back to Photoshop. File, Place Embedded. File, Place Embedded. And I'm going to start with my background picture. I'm going to click on my background picture and then click Place. Oh no, we have blank space on this side and this side. What should I do to fill up that blank space that's on either side of the photo? Any ideas? Yep, it's already, the bounding box is already there, so it's ready to transform. Now, what do you think? Should I click on these edges and click and drag over? Or should I click on the corners and resize it? Should I drag from the edge or should I drag from the corner? Starla said corners, and Starla is correct. Here's why. Now pay very, very close attention here. And you know, I realize some students don't quite sometimes understand the vocabulary between edge and corner, so I'm gonna explain that in a second. And vertical and diagonal and horizontal. So I wanna make sure I take a moment to explain what vertical means and horizontal and diagonal, and also the difference between edge and corner. But the edge is a vertical line, and it's kind of like a leg on a table, right? So imagine how a leg on a table goes up and down. That's vertical. Up and down is vertical, okay? And if I click and drag from here, what happens to my image? My image gets distorted. It gets stretched. It looks bad. Do not do this ever. Write this down in your notes, everyone. Never, ever resize something from the edge. If you look up here at the width and the height, you can see my width is at 30% and my height is at 21%. The width and the height should always be the exact same percentage. So I'm going to Command Z to undo, and I'm going to Option Command Z to repeat undo. Option Command Z, Option Command Z. Okay, so I'm going to go File, Place Embedded. Now, instead of clicking from the edge, I'm going to click from the corner. And you can think of a corner as kind of the pointy edge, the pointy part of a box. You know, when the top of a box comes together with the side of a box, that's the corner. And now diagonal, I understand, is kind of a difficult concept. So I want to find a picture so you guys can understand what diagonal means. So vertical, horizontal, diagonal. Now here we go. Oh, this is a perfect example. So these are all the different directions that I am going to talk about in our class session today. Whenever I say the word horizontal, I want you to think of a flat line that goes side to side, like the floor that you're maybe standing on or sitting on right now. Or for those of you who are sitting on a chair, the seat of your chair where your bottom is right now is horizontal, okay? Now vertical is up and down. So when I say click and drag vertically, think of the wall that maybe is right next to your side, the wall that goes up and down, the wall that holds the roof on your house. That's vertical. So when I say click and drag vertically, I mean up and down. Now diagonal is kind of tricky for us to understand sometimes because diagonal is not vertical or horizontal. It's halfway in between. So if you think of the roof on a house or the side of a triangle, and when I say click and drag diagonally, I mean click and drag at this diagonal angle that's kind of like the roof of a house, okay? So when I am resizing this object, I'm gonna be clicking and dragging diagonally. That means I'm gonna move my cursor to the corner. A lot of vocab words today. So I'm moving my cursor to the corner. I'm holding down the shift button and I'm clicking and dragging diagonally. And see, as I'm holding down the shift button and clicking diagonally, the width and the height are staying the same number, and that's our goal. We want the W and the H to stay exactly the same number so our image doesn't look skewed. So now I'm going to go back to the bottom corner and I'm going to hold down the shift button and I'm going to click and drag again diagonally while holding down the shift button. And I'm only going to release the shift button once I have released my clicker. And now you can see up here the width and the height has stayed the same. Before you hit enter or return after resizing your object and your background the way that you want it to be resized, go up and check the width and the height, because if you accidentally took your finger off the cursor, you might have accidentally changed the width or the height so that they're different numbers. And you can just type in by hand the numbers so that the width and the height is the same. Now, after you've got both those numbers exactly the same, then you can hit enter or return on your keyboard. And now that background image is placed. Now I'm going to bring my next picture in. So I'm going to go to File, Place Embedded. And I'm going to go to this little meerkat here. Where is he? And I'll move him right here. And I can resize him. And if I wanted to shrink him down a little bit, like I can also resize him from these numbers up here. So let's say I wanted to make him 55%. I could just type in 55 for width, and then I could type in 55 for height. And now he's a little bit shorter. And now I can hit enter or return. Next, I can go to File, Place Embedded, and I can place this little hat on here. Now this is another case where we're going to have to resize something. So we talked about resizing from the edges, and I told you to write in your notes, never resize from the edge, always, cross that out, right? Never, never resize from the edge. Is it ever okay to resize from the top or the bottom? No, never, never resize from the top or the bottom. Is it okay to resize from the corner? Great, yes. And then what key do I hold down before I begin resizing? Shift. So I hold down the shift button, and then what direction do I click and drag in when I'm resizing something? Diagonally. So I'm going to hold down the shift button and I'm going to click and drag diagonally to shrink that down. And now when I want to move this object around, all I have to do is click on an empty part of the image. So not the center of the image, not the edge of the image, an empty part of the image in the center. And I can place it where I want it. And I place it by hitting enter or return. And now we just have to bring in one more thing. So I'm going to go File, Place Embedded. And I'm going to bring in that magic wand. I'm going to hold down the shift button, click and drag diagonally. And now, right now, my magic wand is not facing the direction that I want it to face. I want it to be facing this way. So I'm going to use my transform controls to flip it around. So to flip it, I'm going to go up to Edit, Transform, Flip, Horizontal. Edit, Transform, Flip, Horizontal. Now to move my picture, what shortcut key do I use to move a picture? It's the letter V. So I'm going to click the letter V on my keyboard, and then I'm going to click on this and drag it. So it's like about where his little hand is. And I'm going to hit Enter and Return. So now we have to go through the work of cutting everything out. Let's take a look at a finished project really quick so you can kind of see how it's going to eventually look. Okay, so see how color adjustments have been made to make it all look like it all belongs together? That's really important. I'm just gonna disable these layer masks really quick. So originally, all these objects came in just like I did here. They're all in their pictures. And what we have to do is now cut them out by using layer masks. Right? And so once we use layer masks, we can cut these objects out of their background. And then we can begin adding shading and highlighting. We can also adjust the color. And we can do all sorts of things to it, okay? So the first thing we're gonna do is cut out that prop. And this prop is made out of straight edges only. So I'm gonna select the prop, and I know the prop is selected because it's blue in my layer panel. And then I'm gonna go over to what tool allows me to make selections from straight edges only? The polygon lasso tool, very good. So I'm gonna go over to where all my lasso tools are roommates together, and I'm gonna click on the polygon lasso tool, and then I'm just gonna click my way around and see now I have fully enclosed that magic wand in a selection. And I've kind of stayed inside the edge of the object, so it has a nice clean line. And then you can click on the square with the circle inside of it. Ta-da! Now though, I want to make it look like his little hand is holding it, because right now it looks like it's floating on top of his hand. So Stephanie asked, do I hold anything while using that tool? No. No buttons, I'm just clicking and dragging. So in order to make this look like the magic wand is being held in his little hand, I'm gonna erase this part of the magic wand to make it look like his hand is holding it. And see, now it looks like he's clutching it in his little finger. Now I am going to cut out the hat. And a good tool to cut out this hat with would be the pen tool. So I would say before you start using the pen tool in Photoshop, play the Bezier game that I just showed you, because it teaches you all the ins and outs of that tool. So I'm going to use the pen tool. I'm going to make sure that I'm on the path option up at the top of the screen. Shape, path, and pixels. Path is selected. Now I'm going to click and drag. Manny asks, how do you make his hand look like it's holding the wand? You simply erase part of the wand that would be covered by his hand by using your paintbrush tool. Okay, so now I have outlined that hat using the path. And now I'm going to click on the square with the circle inside of, now I'm going to click the Make Selection button up at the top of the screen. The Make Selection button up at the top of the screen. I'm going to click OK. And now I'm going to click on the square with the circle inside of it at the bottom of the layer panel. Uh-oh, what did I do wrong? I didn't invert my selection. So what's the shortcut key to invert my mask? Not just I by itself, Command I. There we go. And I'm just gonna Command T, shrink this down a little bit, hold down the Shift button, shrink, shrink, shrink. And for whatever reason, even though I'm holding down the Shift button, it did slightly resize strangely. Notice my numbers up at the top of the screen say 72.45 and 71.21. So I'm going to change the height to 72.45 so that both the width and the height are the same. And then I'm going to hit Enter or Return. Alrighty, so now I just need to cut the little meerkat out of his background, right? So to make it easy on us, by the way, I just hit Enter, Return to get out of the bounding box. To make it easy on us, I'm going to turn the little eyeball off on the hat and off on the magic wand. And I'm going to get my brush tool out. I'm going to make sure that my brush is on 100% hardness. My blending mode is on normal. My opacity is at 100 and my flow is at 100. I'm going to click on my animal layer. I'm going to hit D to reset my foreground and background colors to be pure black and white. Really important, write that down. D to reset your foreground and background colors. And now, once I have my brush settings the way I want them, I'm going to hit Q on my keyboard. Q. And for some reason, every time I hit Q, my colors flip. And I don't know why it's been doing that. But now to flip my colors again, I'm going to hit X. So now every time I paint with black, there we go, and I can paint in my selection this way. And I would recommend staying just a little bit inside the lines. And remember, use your shortcut keys to resize your brush. Next to the letter P on your keyboard, there is the left bracket and the right bracket. And the left bracket makes your brush smaller, and the right bracket makes your brush bigger. Shrink, shrink, shrink. Now you can also, if you want to kind of capture the furry quality of him, you can use the smudge tool. The smudge tool is on the same button as your blur and sharpen tools. And so you can use the smudge tool to smudge out the edge of this mask. And I just increased my strength to 90 by typing 9 on my keyboard. So you can smudge the edges, and it will help to kind of capture that furry quality of him. So he's not just like as if he's been cut out by scissors or something. He still has a little bit of softness. So now after I've completely painted him in using the quick mask, what do I click to turn this into a selection? Nope, not add a layer mask. We need to make a selection first. And there's no make selection button up at the top of the screen. So what I need to do is hit Q one more time. So I need to hit Q one more time. And Q turns that quick mask into a selection. But notice I've selected everything except for the meerkat. So I need to invert my selection. And what's the shortcut key to invert my selection? It's not Command I. Command I inverts a mask. Shift Command I inverts a selection. So write that down. Command I inverts a mask. Shift Command I inverts a selection. So I'm going to hit Shift Command I because it's still a selection. It's not a mask yet. And then I'm going to go down to the bottom of the layer panel and click on the square with the circle inside of it. And there I've cut him out. I have the hat and I have the magic wand. So now we get to do the fun part, which is adding the lighting to make it look realistic. What we definitely need is a drop shadow underneath him, right? Because it definitely seems like the way that this picture is being lit is that the light is coming from above and behind. So I need a shadow directly underneath his feet. So I'm going to click on my background layer. Click on your background layer. And then I'm going to make a new layer above my background layer by hitting Shift Command N or by clicking the new layer icon. And then I'm going to click on the paintbrush tool. And then I'm going to go up to the top of the screen and reduce the hardness all the way down to 0%. And I'm going to paint a shadow that is roughly the size of his head. Does this shadow look realistic? No, this does not look like a realistic shadow at all. It looks like someone dropped some paint right there and there's like a hole in your artwork. So what we need to do is put that shadow in perspective and then also add a few more shadows. So I'm going to hit Command T, write this down guys, Command T is the transform controls. And this time I do want to squish it. I want to squish it so that it's in perspective. So I'm going to squish from the top. I'm going to squish from the bottom. I'm going to squish from the top, squish from the bottom. And now we have a shadow that is in perspective. I can pull it out just a little bit. And it doesn't need to be quite so dark. So I'm going to lower the opacity on this shadow just a little bit. There we go. So we also need shadows on the meerkat because, like I said, the light is coming from above. So his hat is going to cast a shadow. The light is also coming from behind. His front is going to be cast in shadow. His knees are going to cast a shadow. So I'm going to make a new layer above the meerkat. And watch, I'm not going to do fancy painting here. I'm using a nice big brush, and I'm going to be painting with very broad strokes. So I'm going to paint under his knees here. I'm going to paint underneath his arms, kind of down the front, like that, because the light's coming from the top and behind. And I'm going to paint underneath his chin. And definitely underneath his face and also underneath the hat there. And doesn't this look like a mess right now? Maybe underneath his hand there. What we need to do now is clip these shadows I've painted to the animal. And I do that by holding down the Alt or Option key on my keyboard, the Alt or Option key. And now I'm going to hover my cursor over the line between layer 2 and animal 3. And I'm going to click. And so now those shadows are clipped to the animal. But it's still really, really dark. So I'm going to lower the opacity. And that's looking much better. Now I also want to put a little bit of that magic wand in shadow as well. So I'm going to click on the magic wand layer. I'm going to make a new layer above the magic wand layer. And I'm going to paint, because his hand is going to kind of cast a shadow. And I'm going to paint kind of on the underside of the magic wand here. And maybe I can kind of paint on the underside here. And then I'm going to clip it. So Alt or Option button, hold down the Alt or Option button on your keyboard, and then click on the line between layer 3 and prop 2. And then I'm just going to lower the opacity a little bit. Now we're almost there. We want, you know what? I want to see a little bit of light on his nose, because if light's coming from above, we're going to see some light there. So I'm going to hit E for erase. I'm just going to erase and get, oops, wrong layer. Click on layer 2. And now I'm going to hit E for erase. There we go. That looks nice. Maybe just a little bit of light hitting him there, and maybe a little bit of light hitting on his shoulder here. There we go. It's your artistic choice. Make it look good. Okay. Now I want all of the lighting to kind of be the same color. So this is a good place to use the photo filter that you used last week. You want to put the photo filter above everything else. So go to your topmost layer and then click on the circle that's light on one side, dark on the other. And then you're going to click on photo filter. And you can choose any filter that you want. How about a little bit of a cooling filter? Increase the density. Now everything has kind of a bluish nighttime feel to it, which is nice. But I also personally think that having a vignette really helps to kind of focus the attention towards the center on the subject. So if I go to the circle that's light on one side, dark on the other at the bottom of the layer panel, I can click on it and I can click on gradient. And then I can bring up the radial gradient. I can click reverse, see what I'm doing, just exactly like we did last week. Click on the gradient, click on radial gradient, click reverse. Increase the scale. And have a little something like that. And if I wanted to kind of like just for kicks, brighten up the subject himself and brighten up the center a little bit more, I can make a new layer on top of everything else. I can then go to my brush tool again, and this time use white. And I'll kind of paint in like a spotlight on him. Of course, I'm not going to leave it like that because it doesn't look good. But I am going to change the blending mode. See where it says blending mode? Normal, or see where it says normal rather. We're going to change normal to soft light. Change normal to soft light. And if I'm going too fast at any point, just feel free to shout out in the chat and say slow down. And then I'm going to lower the opacity. So we have before, after, just a little bit of brightness there, before, after. Just to make him more of the focal point. Now, what are you going to turn this in as this week? What file type are you submitting? PSD, very good. So let's save a PSD file. And oh, sure, the process for making the little light. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, this is exactly like we did for the week 2 assignment where we painted light on Harley. We're going to make a new layer. We're going to get the brush tool out and make sure that our brush is on 0% hardness. And we're going to make sure that we're painting with white. And then I'm going to dab right in the center of my document. Got that? And then see where it says normal in this drop-down menu on the layer panel? See where it says the word normal? You're going to click on the word normal, and you're going to change it from normal to soft light. You're going to change it from normal to soft light. And now you're going to lower the opacity by going up here where it says in the layer panel opacity. And you're going to lower the opacity like so. And then you can click on the before and after by clicking on the little eyeball, before, after. Then I'm going to go to File, Save As. We're going to find our school folder for DES104 that we made. I'm going to name this DES104_week3_ your name. And then you're going to hit save. And that PSD is what you're going to be turning in. Any questions about this? Okay. Now, the discussion this week is all about non-destructive editing, which is the type of photo editing that we are using, the professional process, where every change you make is on a separate layer. And even though this discussion seems like it's your opinion, and people tend to think that with an opinion, there's no right or wrong answer. Well, guess what? With this discussion, there is definitely a right answer and there's definitely a wrong answer. So pay attention. The right answer is, okay, you have these two designers here, Alan Johnson Smith and Lakeisha, and you're supposed to pick which designer has the best process, the most professional process. And the answer is Lakeisha's process is the best and most professional way of working in Photoshop. Her way is the most industry standard way of working in Photoshop, because she has all of her changes on separate layers. She uses non-destructive editing. And so if she ever has to make a change to her project, if her client or her editor comes back to her and says, you know what, I need you to change the color of this object, she can do it in 2 seconds, as opposed to having to start the whole project all over again. So this guy, Alan Johnson Smith, he only has 3 layers on his project. If someone were to come to him and say, hey, change the dotted circles that are around the blue circle to a different color and a different size, he would have to start his whole project all over again, because it's all on a merged layer. Lakeisha would be able to make that change and it would be really easy. So in addition to discussing why Lakeisha's technique is the best, be sure to also cite your reasoning using sources of some kind, and you can find tons of internet resources on non-destructive editing and why non-destructive editing is the best way to work, and why it's important for designers to use non-destructive editing, and what different techniques are for non-destructive editing. You can find tons and tons of interviews and articles and resources on that. So be sure to cite your sources, and then also take a look at the benchmark examples that have been provided for you on how to effectively write this discussion post. So that's going to be pretty easy. I just gave you the right answer, and I explained to you the reasoning behind it. So I expect everyone to get a really good grade on this, hopefully. Okay. And then your assessment this week, you guys, is super fun and super easy, actually. Instead of being a project, it is a quiz on Photoshop tools and mistakes that sometimes happen with working in Photoshop. And I have, in this class session tonight, talked about some of the things that are going to be topics on your quiz this week. But here's the thing, you don't have to study for this quiz. This is called a didactic quiz, which means that once you click open and you view this quiz, it's going to take you to, like, there will be a reading or a video that you watch, and you'll watch that video or you'll read that reading, and then you'll answer the questions based on that reading or video. And check it out, you guys. There's no time limit. I would estimate that this quiz will probably take you 30 minutes to do. So you can kind of allot yourself that time. There's also, you can take this quiz as many times as you want. So there is no reason why any of you should get less than a perfect score on this quiz. Okay? Any questions so far on anything that I've talked about? Okay, so something that has kind of been hinted at with this non-destructive editing is layers. And from week 1, we've talked about the importance of having everything on a separate layer. And not only is it important to have everything on separate layers so that you can work non-destructively and make changes to your projects, but you can actually do some really, really cool advanced things with layers. And you're gonna learn about these things in your future Photoshop classes. But one of these really, really cool things that you can do with layers is animation. And you can make animated GIFs in Photoshop. This is something that I think is gonna be useful for you as artists in your careers, and it's a skill that you're adding, but you're certainly not required to do a project on animation this week, so I don't want to freak you guys out. I'm just showing what layers are capable of. Okay, if you go to Window, and then you go to Timeline, Window Timeline, it brings up this feature here, which will allow you to animate your layers. What we're going to do is click Create Video Timeline. And now, let's say I want to animate that spotlight so that it comes on, okay? And that spotlight here is layer 5. I'm going to delete layer 4 because we don't need it. So to animate that spotlight so it starts off and it comes on, I'm going to click on this little arrow here next to layer 5. I'm going to move, this is like called my current time indicator. It's like that play button on QuickTime or Netflix or anything that anytime you watch a movie, it's that little button that like you can scroll through the video. And I'm going to click on the little stopwatch next to the word opacity. And I'm going to start layer 5 on 0% opacity. So I'm basically telling Photoshop, start with this light off. And now I'm going to move my current time indicator forward 1 second. And I'm going to change my opacity all the way up to 100. And then maybe I'll move my cursor to 2 seconds. And I'll just have my opacity go down to, say, 27, something simple like that. Now watch what happens. I'm going to move my current time indicator from the beginning, and I'm going to hit play. And you can see this light kind of comes on and then goes off again. So this is how you can create animated GIFs in Photoshop. Yep, Photoshop allows you to do little video editing and little animations. So now we're going to do a little bit more complicated animation. We have, where's our hat? Our hat is hat 2. So I'm going to have this hat start from above and then land on his head. So I'm going to click on the little arrow here, and that's next to hat 2. And, oh, it's difficult because the layer mask is on. I have to turn the layer mask off. I have to enable it. So, I should have done this earlier. Okay, so now I got rid of my my layer mask. So now it's just a regular object by itself. And so I'm going to animate the position. So I'm going to turn my stopwatch on position. And I'm going to use my move tool to move this hat off screen. So when the animation starts, the hat is off screen. And then by the time we get to about 1.5 seconds into the animation, I just hit Command T so I could see the bounding box. I'm gonna have the hat land on his head. So let's watch that. No, I'll have to do it backwards. I think my Photoshop is running a little bit out of RAM. There we go. Okay, so these are called keyframes, and I'm basically telling the object start here and then end here, okay? So that's my little animation. And if I want to make that hat come in faster, I can move these keyframes closer together. And now watch. Ta-da! And then when you are happy with your animated GIF and you are ready to put it out on Twitter, or you're ready to use it for your website, you can go to File, Export, Save for Web, and the file type that you are going to save this as is GIF. And again, this isn't a project that's due this week, so I don't want a bunch of emails about you guys freaking out. I'm just showing you the importance of non-destructive editing, and we're going to adjust these settings really quick. And how you can use all these layers in really cool ways. I'm just finding the right setting so that it looks good. And now I'm going to hit looping options forever, and I'll hit save, and I'll call this Meerkat Hat. And then we're going to go to Finder. And this is how it's going to look on the internet. That's my little animated GIF. Alrighty, let's review a few things, and then I'll show you guys some professional animated GIFs well, not no animated GIF is professional, but you know, you guys want to see some inspiring stuff. Yeah, GIFs are fun. Now, the arm and the leg will only move, Starla, if you have the arm and leg on a separate layer. Because you can change the opacity, you can change the position, but only for like a complete layer. You can't change part of a layer. So you can cut out his arm, put it on its own layer, and then you can move that. So quick review, after painting a quick mask in the quick mask mode, how do you turn it into a selection? Q. After making a path with the pen tool, how do you turn that into a selection? Click the Make Selection button. Very good. When making a path or a custom shape, there are 3 options available at the menu at the top of the screen. What are those 3 options? Huh, huh, and ha-ha. The first one starts with SH. Shape, path, and pixels, right? Shape, path, and pixels. What's this icon? This is the adjustment layers. Very good. And what mistake was made when resizing this box? Yep, definitely the artist resized it from the edges, not the corners, and didn't hold down the shift button when resizing. So to wrap things up, working non-destructively means having many layers. And when you watch the pre-recorded lecture and also do the recording, you'll see that there's many, many different ways to work non-destructively in Photoshop. You can either use adjustment layers, use layer masks, smart objects, smart filters, and make all of your changes on separate layers. This is really important. And so when working with lighting and making everything look like it all belongs together, adjustment layers and blending modes combined together can help everything like feel like it belongs, instead of like, oh, that clearly looks like a picture that was cut out of another picture and put here. So my pre-recorded lecture this week goes into deep detail on all of the different adjustment layers and what you can do with them, and all of the different blending modes. There's also some reading this week on the different adjustment layers and blending modes and what you can do with them. Or you can be like me and learn about them just by experimenting and seeing what happens. I want to remind you all, since we are in week 3, that means we're almost halfway, we're more than halfway done with the course. So please, please be sure to back up all of your native file formats on a separate hard drive from your computer, because one of these days your computer is just not going to turn on, and you want to make sure that all of your files are safe and backed up and secure on a location that is not your computer, somewhere else, somewhere safe. Okay, let's take a look at some fancy animated GIFs made with Photoshop. I think you guys are going to get a kick out of these. And then I'll open up the rest of the questions, the class to questions if you guys have any. Oh my gosh, I can't talk tonight. And remember, I'm here for you. I expect all of you guys to come out of this class with an A. So if there's anything that you're worried about or anything that you're struggling with, reach out to me. Come to my multi-sessions on Friday and Saturday, and I'm here to help you.
GIFs were established as a free and sort of like usable part of the web.
GIFs are great because it's a low barrier of entry. Anybody can play around, and it's fun.
The animated GIF for us was just a photograph that could move and existed forever.
This is a photograph that is still alive, and so we were already thinking beyond the limitations of the file name.
An animated GIF is an image that's been encoded using the graphics interchange format, where it has multiple frames encoded into a single image file, and a web browser or other piece of software will play those images back in animated sequence automatically. The original GIF specification came out in 1987. Early example of GIFs that you see are flames. Like, flames are very popular, and the waving American flag is all over the place. Most notoriously is the under construction GIF. But then by the time you get to like 95, 96, you've got the release of the Netscape browser and these web browsers that can automatically animate them. And all of a sudden you see this new spike in popularity. But following that, there's this sudden division between the Web 1.0 of the 70s and 80s and 90s, and then Web 2.0 of like the 2000s moving forward. So the idea of using GIFs becomes way less fashionable. But around 2007, 2008, popularity is swinging back up. People start to realize that you can use GIFs for tons of different things. Like, now that we're in 2011, 2012, there's more GIFs online, but you also have way more places to put them. Things like Reddit and Tumblr, WordPress, even like Twitter to a certain degree. So you're seeing actually this like postmodern GIFs. And the tools for GIF creation are becoming more widespread.
GIFs can be anything, but what unites the GIFs is that they're short, and they are something that most Tumblr users can create themselves. People are sharing more, and I think Tumblr definitely has a part of that. Humans really like repetition. We feel comfortable with it. And sometimes just the longer you watch something, the funnier it gets, or it'll actually change meanings. You have the glitch art, you have pixel art, TV movies, and you have stuff that you can't even really categorize. I think it's mostly on people driving the forum, definitely, because it enhances their online persona. Just being able to make some of those makes you so cool. It's uncharted territory right now. And I think really anything has the possibility, the potential of being in our forum. But certainly around animated GIFs, we've seen a transformation. We've seen them go from just people taking TV shows. We've seen people making original stuff with them. Mashups between video games and movie characters, and even Tumblr memes. I think there's other new art forms waiting to be discovered in there that we just haven't figured out yet.
So we were doing fashion editorials, and that's all in magazines and things like that. And the fashion world really didn't latch on to the internet. So we wanted to push that.
It makes sense that the web is there. Why put a still picture online? The image can now move.
So instead of making still pictures, you would make animated pictures, and they would just go on infinitely forever.
Everyone always describes our work as creepy.
What's creepy about it?
But our work is very playful. So, I mean, I think the two biggest inspirations is, one, the web. We work off of memes, and memes are in our work.
They're just a kid making something funny with their friend and tossing it up online because they can.
That's where the best memes come from, you know?
Yeah.
It's accidents. But besides that, video games.
It lends itself to like video game culture, like playing a game and, you know, blowing people up on the moon and slaying dragons and things like that. It's just this idea that you could be anything and
you can become
go
anyone.
anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, these are possible in games.
We get bored really, really quick. And it's always about doing the next thing in technology. And it used to be that art was in museums on walls. And now all of a sudden, with this thing of the web and art on screens, all of a sudden you go to the MoMA and there's a screen with art on it. So we just want to be there.
think there's opportunities with this kind of hybrid medium to show people something they've never seen before, to have these moments that can just exist forever.
It's like this little magical warp of time. We could live within a moment within that moment, like to dream of something and then create it in a camera and share it with people and let them dream with you just for a moment.
It allows a moment to live on, and there's something kind of fascinating about that.
Whatever that one thing is that is alive is what your eye is going to go to. It sets the emotional impact of what the cinematograph will be.
It's a big creative decision for us, like what moment to focus on.
We have a cinematograph called Anna Sees Everything. She's watching the show, and it's kind of like a little portrait of her. This is what she does for a living.
So like watching the footage of Bill Cunningham, he didn't take a picture of every model that walks by.
When he likes something, he likes it and he shoots it. When he doesn't, he doesn't, and he doesn't even think about it.
So like we get to learn something, and watching somebody for hours on end while we work on it, we understand them.
It's so voyeuristic. You look, then you feel like you should look away, but then you can watch it, and so then you can watch it some more, and it's like, oh.
The simplicity of it, I feel, is really beautiful, and we see it as an evolution of photography. If you think of all the ways that photography is displayed, these are areas that we want to go into.
There's little parts of it that are alive, and you can choose to engage in depth into the art, or you can choose to just glance at it and it's there as if it's a photograph.
And it's essentially something you've never seen before.
Who are those people for whom, like, they think in GIFs, or like they almost speak in GIFs? And I think once you get to that point, yeah, like, sure, it's art.
The ideal of art has changed.
And we've always seen what we can get away with. It's fun.
When we started making these, we were calling them animated GIFs, but it was so much more than that.
It's just too new, and I love being a part of this at a time when we're just figuring it out.
We should say GIF.
Questions. I'm opening up the rest of the class to questions if you guys have any. If not, you are free to go. Thank you guys all for being such a great class, and I will see you in the classroom.